to celebrate the very best in scholarly publications in Canada. We're especially delighted to be joined by the Honourable Kirsty Duncan, Minister for Science, and I know in her heart a real champion of the social sciences and humanities, so we're delighted to have her here. With your presence here, yes. I know that with your presence, Minister Duncan, and the assembled scholars and members of the public, this will be a wonderful evening of celebration. The Federation for the Humanities and Social Sciences promotes research, learning, and an understanding of contributions made by the humanities and social sciences for a free and democratic society. Established in 1940, with a membership now comprising more than 160 universities, colleges, and scholarly associations, the Federation represents a diverse community of 91,000 researchers and graduate students across our great country. One of our key activities is the Awards to Scholarly Publications program, also known as ASPP. You'll hear that again. Each year, the ASPP offers approximately 185 grants totaling $1.5 million to support the publication of Canadian scholarly books that make a crucial contribution to knowledge in the humanities and social sciences and give a voice to Canada and Canadians in that global conversation. This important program is generously funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, for which we are grateful. The focus of the evening, of course, is the Canada Prizes, which are awarded annually to the best scholarly books in the humanities and social sciences that have received funding from the ASPP. Les Prix du Canada consacrent des œuvres qui ont apporté une contribution exceptionnelle à la recherche, sont rédigées de façon exigeante et enrichissent la vie sociale, culturelle et intellectuelle du Canada. Now, there's been a change in this year's prizes. First awarded in 1991, the Canada Prizes celebrated their 25th anniversary last year, and some of you were there to celebrate with us. In an effort to mark this milestone and to recognize the increasingly interdisciplinary nature of the humanities and social sciences, the Federation has now combined the humanities and social sciences categories to award two $5,000 prizes to the best ASPP-funded book in English and to the best ASPP-funded book in French. On behalf of the Federation, I want to thank this year's jurors for the countless hours of reading and deliberation they undertook to select this year's finalists and winners. The two juries were chaired by Professor Pierre Pontil, Professor of History at Université d'Ottawa, and David Smith, Distinguished Visiting Professor at Ryerson University and Professor Emeritus at the University of Saskatchewan. I also want to acknowledge the presence of representatives from our 8 finalists and our 2 winners, universities and publishers. Thank you for all of your support and for attending this evening. It's now a real pleasure to pass the podium to Dr. Ted Hewitt, President of the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, a great friend of the Federation, who will introduce the Minister. Ted.
Merci, Stephen, Madame Duncan, Monsieur Laforêt, Monsieur Miller, Mesdames et Messieurs, good afternoon, everybody. I'm exceedingly pleased to be here this afternoon with all of my many colleagues from SSHRC to help celebrate excellence in literary scholarship as the Canada Prizes are presented to books funded by the Awards to Scholarly Publications program, of which SSHRC is a sponsor. I'd like to take a minute, first of all, to congratulate Guy Laforêt on becoming the new president of the Federation, and on behalf of SSHRC to bid fond farewell almost to Dr. Tu. We're extremely grateful to him for all that he has done through his tenure in support of our disciplines and the research enterprise in general, and at the same time, of course, we very much look forward to working with Guy as he charts the way forward for the Federation. Le CERSH est fier de participer au financement du prix d'auteur pour l'édition Savant Comme vous le savez, les livres publiés à l'aide de cette prix sont les meilleurs ouvrages en sciences humaines. Ils contribuent à enrichir la société canadienne et à alimenter l'ingéniosité et les politiques fondées sur les données probantes, deux éléments cruciaux d'une économie florissante et prospère. In the information age, as the old adage goes, knowledge is power. It's also the key to success in an increasingly competitive and global marketplace. And this is something that Minister Duncan knows very well. En tant que membre du Parlement, elle préconise avec enthousiasme l'innovation et la prospérité. En tant que ministre des Sciences, elle milite avec passion pour la découverte et la créativité dans la recherche scientifique. A former associate professor of health sciences at the University of Toronto and a former research director for the AIC Institute of Corporate Citizenship at the Rodman School of Management, Minister Duncan has, throughout her career, actively promoted such pressing issues as climate change, the development of resilient communities, and the establishment of educational initiatives that benefit Canadian youth. She's currently leading the charge for greater equity and diversity in Canadian research, a charge that we in our community wholeheartedly support. It's therefore my pleasure to introduce to you the Honourable Kirsty Duncan, Minister of Science.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Ted, distinguished guests, honored colleagues, and most importantly, our social sciences and humanities researchers. Good afternoon. Je c'est un plaisir d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui. In addition to acknowledging my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Ted Hewitt, may I also recognize Stephen Tu, President of the Federation of the Humanities and Social Sciences, Guy Laforêt, President-elect of the Federation. That's about to change in 3 hours, I understand. The staff and volunteers who have made this year's Congress possible, and finally, to today's Canada Prize Award winners. I am sincerely humbled to be among so many of Canada's talented social sciences and humanities scholars, so that we can all celebrate your tremendous achievements. And could I ask for a round of applause to recognize all of you? I am eagerly awaiting the results. For those of you who don't know, my background is geography, and you've heard that I taught health and environment and corporate citizenship. My own research and lived experience cut across the natural sciences, the social sciences, and humanities. 20 years ago, I led a team of world-renowned scientists and experts on a research expedition to Svalbard, Norway, 500 miles from the North Pole. As you can imagine, the expedition was an incredible experience that came with its share of challenges. Our mission was to find the cause of the 1918 Spanish flu, which killed upwards of 50 million people. It killed more people than the Black Death of the Middle Ages, more people than all fighting in the First World War. And half of those deaths were people between 20 to 40 years of age. They were healthy adults. I wanted to know why. I wanted to find the virus so we could make a better flu vaccine and test our drugs against history's deadliest disease. The best chance of finding this virus was to exhume bodies of 6 young men who were believed to have died of Spanish flu on their way from Norway to Svalbard to take up jobs as coal miners. You can imagine the barriers we faced. Raising the money to carry out the multidisciplinary, multinational expedition, seeking government approvals to conduct the exhumations, developing the safety protocols to protect everyone involved, and transporting 2 tons of supplies to the Arctic, and so on. We didn't get all the answers we were looking for, and I'm proud that our research was recognized for the biosafety standards we set for keeping our team safe and the nearby community safe. The point is, first-hand experience helps inform my approach as Minister of Science. I firmly believe that it's our government's job to help our world-class researchers and scholars access the support they need to create new knowledge and to discover. We are living in rapidly changing times, whether it's technological advances, climate change, geopolitical realities. There is so much that can affect or be affected by the sciences, humanities in today's world. And that's why I commissioned a review of federal support for research and scholarship to ensure we are doing our best to support students, professors, and everyone else involved in our research community. A broad external review of the federal ecosystem had not been done since the 1970s, simply put, at this time. As you know, the independent review was led by a blue ribbon panel of 9 research and innovation leaders who represented all disciplines. Their comprehensive, rigorous analysis and recommendations will inform our decisions on the future of Canadian research and scholarship, and I look forward to sharing that vision with you in due course. In the meantime, I want to offer my profound gratitude to the Federation for the invaluable contribution it made to the process. And I'd also like to thank the many individual researchers who shared their ideas for how to improve Canada's research ecosystem. I was pleased the report clearly acknowledged the essential role of the full range of scientific and scholarly disciplines. Quote, research in the social sciences and humanities holds equal promise to help Canada address many of the challenges the nation faces, end of quote. And as everyone in this room knows, this is true, and I could not agree more. The social sciences and humanities help us to understand the issues facing our society, culture, environment, technology, and even our politics. It is your research, your insights that improve our communities, business, and government. The Fundamental Review also has much to say on the issue of inclusion, equity, and diversity. These are some of the core values that have informed so many of our government's actions, from appointing the first gender-balanced cabinet to including the first gender statement in Budget 2017. We believe that we must improve access to opportunities so that everyone has a shot at contributing to the future of our country. La Charte des droits et des libertés reconnaît constitutionnellement depuis 35 ans cette année le droit et l'égalité. Je sais que les universités reconnaissent l'importance de l'équité. However, the report asserts there is a lot more work to be done in this area. The bottom line is we're not where we need to be on diversity and equity. And this is exactly the message I delivered to Canada's university presidents when I met with them recently. I told them that the report advised that I consider stronger measures to entrench diversity and equity. Already, we have instituted new diversity and equity requirements in the Canada Excellence Research Chairs competition. Right now, we have 20 circs, only one is held by a woman. We can do better, and I'm expecting results. Our government is also strengthening our efforts to address the underrepresentation of 4 designated groups: women, Indigenous peoples, persons with disabilities, and minorities in the Canada Research Chairs program. And I'd really like at this point to really recognize the work of Ted Hewitt and his extraordinary work over these last many months. While there is gender parity among the most recently appointed chairs in the social sciences and humanities, much more could be done to improve the chronic lack of diversity and equity in other disciplines. It was an important first step to launch the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Action Plan recently that will help universities meet their Canada Research Chairs targets. And if universities are not able to meet their voluntary targets in 2 years, I will consider withholding review and funding. I will also continue to explore other measures to promote more diversity, equity, and inclusion in the research experience, because excellence and equity are not mutually exclusive. I am determined to champion this issue for the good of research and scholarship. I am grateful to the social sciences and humanities community, since your community has made great strides to be both diverse and balanced. In fact, the last and current cohort of the Insight Grant recipients is made up of 48% women and 52% men. Ladies and gentlemen, I truly believe that one of Canada's key strategic advantages is our social sciences and humanities. I don't have to tell this group that social sciences and humanities researchers provide meaningful context to research findings in other disciplines, help provide evidence for sound policy making, and train the next generation of critical thinkers. I want everyone in this room to know that the government is on your side. We will invest to support your research because we know that a strong culture of research and scholarship will help us build a bold, bright future for all Canadians. I am tremendously grateful to count on the support and, more importantly, the partnership of the Federation for the Humanities and Social Sciences. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. It is a privilege. And finally, to our amazing scholars who have been nominated today, many, many congratulations on being nominated. We are all so proud of your tremendous contributions. Nous sommes très fiers de votre contribution. My friends, thank you, and here's to a wonderful, successful celebration.
It should be obvious that we really do owe her a vote of thanks. C'est un grand honneur d'avoir le ministre, especially in this condition, if I may say. This delicate condition, right? All right, thank you so much, Minister, for that really inspiring talk, which I know we will all take with us, and I think it gives us a real sense of motivation to try hard to make sure that we are supporting you in these endeavors. I think it's really crucial. All right, let's start with the presentation of the Prix du Canada en sciences humaines et sociales. This year's winner is Mylène Bédard for her book Écrire en temps d'insurrection, pratique épistolaire et usage de la presse chez les femmes patriotes, published by Les Presses de l'Université de Montréal. Voici quelques extraits des commentaires de jury. Dans un style remarquablement
accessible, Écrire en temps d'insurrection analyse les pratiques épistolaires des femmes patriotes. L'analyse captivante pratiquée par Mylène Bédard sur des sources jusque-là inexploitées redonne aux femmes leur place en tant que sujet d'une période mouvementée de l'histoire canadienne. Les finalistes pour ce prix incluaient Amélie Bourbeau, technicien de l'organisation sociale, la réorganisation de l'assistance catholique privée à Montréal, publié par McGill Queen's University Press. Marie-France Labrec, la migration saisonnière des Mayas de Yucatan au Canada, la dialectique de la mobilité, publié par les presses de l'Université Laval. Guillaume Pinson, la culture médiatique francophone en Europe et en Amérique du Nord, de 1760 à la veille de la Seconde Guerre mondiale, publié par les presses de l'Université Laval, et Anya Robluski, La vie des autres, Sophie Calle et Annie Ernaux, artistes hors la loi, publié par les presses de l'Université de Montréal. Mylène cannot be with us here today, but Patrick Poirier, director of Les Presses de l'Université de Montréal, is here to accept the prize. Patrick, veuillez venir à l'avant. Et nous avons une vidéo, j'espère, de Mylène. Avant, always the technology. Voudriez-vous dire quelques mots? Merci.
Si tu veux. Écoute, Patrick.
Merci.
Très bien. Oui, pour ceux qui ne le savent pas, Mylène aurait beaucoup apprécié être ici avec vous aujourd'hui. Elle est enceinte. Elle est sur le point d'accoucher. Elle avait donc des priorités autrement plus importantes, disons. Permettez tout simplement que je remercie la Fédération pour ce prix d'une part. Mylène a été ravie, l'équipe des presses de l'Université de Montréal aussi. Moi, je tiens tout simplement à souligner à quel point l'aide, le soutien, l'appui de la Fédération à la publication de la recherche au Canada est essentiel, d'une importance capitale. Non seulement nous comptons sur cet appui, nous dépendons de cet appui. Et le contexte actuel récent, certaines modifications dans le milieu des subventions au Canada fait en sorte que cet appui va devenir de plus en plus essentiel au cours des prochaines années. Je vous remercie beaucoup. Merci.
Félicitations à Mylène Bédard, évidemment. The winner of this year's Canada Prize in the Humanities and Social Sciences is Arthur Ray for his book Aboriginal Rights Claims and the Making and Remaking of History, published by McGill Queen's University Press. Here are some extracts from the jury's citation. Arthur J. Ray's masterful study is based on 3 decades of experience in academic research and in courtrooms as an expert witness in the litigation of Aboriginal rights and treaty claims in Canada. Contrasting Native peoples' forms of transmitting history with that of academic disciplines like law, history, and archaeology, his work illustrates the profound discord between historical evidence based on robust oral traditions and that grounded in the documentary records of European societies. The other finalists in this category were Emily Cameron for Far Off Metal River, Inuit Lands, Settler Stories, and the Making of the Contemporary Arctic, published by the University of British Columbia Press. Gerhard J. Enns and Joseph Sawchuk for From New Peoples to New Nations, Aspects of Métis History and Identity from the 18th to the 21st Centuries, published by the University of Toronto Press. Sean Mills for A Place in the Sun, Haiti, Haitians, and the Remaking of Quebec, published by McGill Queen's University Press. And Donald Wright for Donald Creighton, A Life in History, published by the University of Toronto Press. Arthur, please come up and accept your award. Thank you.
Normally I wouldn't write this out, but having just arrived from Europe last night, I'm not sure what time zone I'm on, so I'm going to read also to keep myself on track. I would like to begin by saying that I feel truly honored that the Federation selected Aboriginal claims in the making and remaking of history for the Canadian Book Prize in 2017. I'd like to point out, though, that my comparative project could not have been completed without the generous help of a host of scholars and members of legal professions in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and the United States. In all of these countries, I was welcomed and brought up to speed on crucial aspects of the histories of Aboriginal peoples, often by individuals who had played crucial, sometimes dangerous roles, such as one of the South Africans. None of them are present, and given time limitations, I will not mention them today. I have acknowledged my debt to them in my book. I could not have undertaken the wide-ranging research that my project entailed without a Killam Research Fellow from the Canada Council for the Arts, a Boer-Alaskan National Fellowship in Human Rights from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, a Woodrow Wilson International Fellowship from the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars in Washington, a visiting senior fellowship from the Institute of Social Change and Critical Inquiry at the University of Wollongong, Australia, and a visiting fellowship from the Stellenbosch Institute for Advanced Studies in South Africa. I would also like to thank the Federation of the Humanities and Social Science for a grant from its award to the Scholarly Publication Program. This program has long played a crucial role in supporting scholarly publishing in Canada, and in my case has helped me since the publication of my first monograph in 1974. Before closing, I would also like to acknowledge three people who are present in the room who have helped me enormously over the years. The first is John Workington, my first department head when I came to Canada in 1970. John doesn't remember it, but he took one look at my teaching load and said, "That's far too heavy. I'll take one of your courses." No. I've never met another department head that's prepared to do that.
Where is he?
And I mention it because as a beginning scholar, it's crucial the environment you start your career in. And John set a really wonderful environment in the geography department at York University where I began. Started me on a research career, which has been very fulfilling, and I really appreciate that. I'd also like to thank Phil Cerconi, who's dedicated his career to scholarly publishing in Canada on Canadian topics. It's been my pleasure to work with Phil and his wonderful MQP team for the last 4 publications that I've done. Finally, I'd like to thank Diane, Dr. Diane Newell, my partner, who is my constant critic, always badgering me to do a little bit more than I feel like doing. And she's my in-house editor and an excellent one. And without Diane, I don't think I would have certainly wouldn't have done this book, because there are many times I felt like giving it up. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and this concludes the presentation of the prizes. I'm now going to hand things over to my friend Guy Laforêt, who's, as you heard, soon going to be the president of the Federation, who's going to lead the next portion of our event featuring a moderated discussion with our English prize winner Arthur Ray and two finalists, Marie-France Labrec and Sean Mills. Meanwhile, the minister is going to make an escape because she has to catch a plane, so please join me as she's leaving in thanking her again for being with us.
Bonne chance et merci, Madame Duncan. Bye. Bonjour tout le monde. Donc, comme Stephen vient de le dire, on passe à l'étape suivante de notre processus cet après-midi. Je suis Guy Laforêt, prof de Sciences Po à Laval et président élu de la Fédération. We will, in the next half an hour, have a discussion with Arthur, Marie-France, and Sean. I had an interview with Mylène Bédard prior that will in the next few weeks, to state it in a feasible way, be put on the website of the Federation, and this will give you an idea about her work. I should start by saying that, as was said, the process of writing, of creating, is so difficult that without the kind of help that is provided by SSHRC and by the Federation for authors, it would be extraordinarily difficult. J'aimerais ajouter, en commençant mon mandat dans quelques heures comme président de la Fédération, que dans un pays bilingue où l'anglais et le français sont structurés dans les relations que l'on connaît, des programmes semblables, bons en tout temps, sont particulièrement nécessaires du côté de la langue et de la communauté linguistique qui est plus fragile que l'autre. Et donc, si ces programmes-là sont nécessaires pour tout le monde, ils sont absolument nécessaires pour l'édition savante en langue française. So, without further ado, I would like to ask Arthur and Sean and Marie-France to sit beside me here, and for half an hour we will discuss about their books. They will also have, Arthur, you should sit right here, and we'll discuss each of the books, and then they will also have a discussion between themselves, with myself, about the nature of the things that we are doing. The first question, and I told them that this would be the first question to each of them as I start the conversation with Arthur. Arthur, what was the spark for this fantastic project of yours?
The spark was, as it was mentioned, that I started my first 10 years of my career, I was mostly doing academic research. And shortly after moving to UBC from York University, I was asked to get involved as an expert in court cases. And I was involved in a very difficult one, the Delgamuukw case in British Columbia. And I was doing research in this paper, and I started realizing that some of the research that I was doing, some of the evidence being presented from anthropology and sociology and archaeology, was based on studies that I had read as a graduate student, and I hadn't realized at the time that research, in fact, had been generated in the 1950s by research being done for the U.S. Indian Claims Commission. So I got interested in why, as a graduate student, I'd taken a number of historiography courses about archaeology, anthropology, historical geography. I hadn't heard of the Indian Claims Commission. And I had no one in our historiography courses that ever talked about the interaction between applied research, which in this case litigation research, and academic research. So I started looking into that, partly interested in my own background, and before I knew it, I discovered that while the Indian Claims Commission had influenced the approach to claims work in New Zealand, had influenced work in Australia, and so it was like dropping a pebble in the water. The project started small, out of sort of interest in my own academic background, and it got much, much larger. I was also surprised to find out early on that in the early claims research, although the claims were about Native rights, the Native voice was silent. So,
Thanks to this, my next question would be with regards to the contribution that, with a distance, you may believe that your work has done with regards to the scholarly community in Canada. But in addition, I would say, this is Canada, but your work is also a major comparative research. You have a sort of panoramic view on this issue. So contribution to scholarship in Canada and possibly on the other territories where your research had relevance.
well, I think it points out the importance of the social sciences and humanities to contemporary issues in Canada for certain, for example, in the area of Aboriginal rights. In my case, my background was interdisciplinary, archaeology, anthropology, and historical geography. And one of the things that I talk about in the book is the interplay of all these disciplines and the law. And a number of years ago, when I first came to UBC, I was talking to a lawyer who told me that the one area of law that's strongly influenced by history and historical evidence is Native law, because Native law is new law. It's being built as we go along. So that more than almost any other area of law, the social sciences and humanities have had a major contribution. So I'm an historian, trained as an historical geographer, but archaeologists, anthropologists, sociologists, political scientists are all making a contribution, and collectively it's an interdisciplinary effort. But I hope the book brings to light is just how complex the interaction is between new research for claims advances the law, which in turn also advances the disciplines that are involved, because one of the things that claims have done is generated a lot of new research, because there was a lot of money in claims, and research is funding dependent. So that's one area, starting in the 1950s with the East Indian Claims Commission, before there were big granting agencies in the state. It really gave a boost to American Indian history. So I've talked about all these aspects of the process, and I think it does say generally the importance of humanities and social sciences to advancing human rights for certain, not just in Canada but elsewhere. But Canada, you can see Canada's role when you look at these other former British colonies and their development and their approaches to claims and rights issues.
Social scientists or humanists, normally we don't go to court every day,
No.
most of us. And
You're lucky you don't.
but you did go, and you made some surprise. There were things surprised you. Can you elaborate a little bit? What surprised you, particularly on the issue of Native claims?
Well, on the issue of Native claims, as I said, one of the things that, let me back up a bit. When I was first asked to do it, I remember naively asking the lawyer, what am I supposed to do as an historical expert? And he said to me, well, you're there to educate the court. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting, but it's a very different classroom. It's an adversarial system, which is something I was not used to, which is not what the classroom is supposed to be. Well, maybe sometimes is, but it's not supposed to be. And a lot of the questions are not, one of the things that bothered me most, I guess, is I realized a lot of the questions aren't being asked because they really want an answer or they're really interested in that piece of history. It's positioning, it's to try and, the question is asked to make a point rather than a curiosity-driven kind of a question. So I found that the courtroom is a very different environment. Not to say that the lawyers and the judges are not interested in history, because they are. And in the long run, I think the longer overview, I think, comes out in my book is that the disciplines have been educating the court, not just me. I mean, the social sciences, because the courts generally, as the lawyer put to me the first time I asked him that question, he said, well, a lot of trial judges think they know history, but they don't. And we've just had the whole business of the residential school inquiries. And that's one aspect of the history that was not as well known to Canada as should be. Well, the other aspect is the effects of colonialism on economic rights. A lot of litigation is about economic rights. And the economic history of Canada vis-a-vis Native people still is not very well known. It's an under-researched area in the humanities and social sciences.
You talked about the contributions of colleagues to your research at the beginning of your career. So this tempts me to ask you, how are we doing these days with regards to transmission on the issues that do concern you? How are Canadian universities, how is our community doing with the new generation?
That's a tough one.
That's my role.
Well, it's the transmission of knowledge. I think I'm not certain that in the social sciences and humanities enough attention is given to the role that academics can play in applied areas. My own department hasn't followed up that much on what I did in that respect. I think Aboriginal people, for example, need the expertise. They ask for the expertise. That's how I got involved through a lawyer, but it was a request from the Native communities. A number of times during the course of my career, I was asked by other colleagues, well, when are you going to get back to doing real academic research? Which I thought was kind of a strange question. Because for me, there's not that much of a difference between curiosity-driven research and applied research. It's maybe the difference is who's asking the question. But some of the applied questions might be not ones you came up with, but they're very interesting questions. And there's always a curiosity side that you can explore with them. So I don't know if I'm not sure I answered your question, but.
And we'll have time during the afternoon because we will come back with Arthur after conversations with the two other winners today. Marie-France, ma collègue de l'Université Laval, whom we met for the first time in Ontario 30 years ago. Marie-France, pour ta recherche sur les travailleurs saisonniers du Yucatan au Canada, toi, quelle a été l'étincelle qui t'a mené à faire ce travail?
En fait, ça a été plus qu'une étincelle, ça a été plusieurs. Je pense que c'était un incendie. Alors, en fait, je m'intéresse aux Autochtones Mayas du Yucatan depuis une quarantaine d'années, depuis mon époque d'étudiante, maîtrise, doctorat ensuite. Et j'ai travaillé sur plusieurs sujets. Et je me suis aperçue, à la fin, plus j'arrivais à la fin de ma carrière, je me suis aperçue que je travaillais, dans le fond, toujours le même sujet, c'est-à-dire la mobilité, que ce soit la mobilité des idées, parce que je me suis intéressée à la diffusion de toute l'idéologie de l'égalité de genre, que ce soit la mobilité des marchandises, parce que je me suis intéressée aux usines maquiladoras, c'est-à-dire les usines de sous-traitance qui se sont installées au Yucatan à un moment donné. Et finalement, je me suis intéressée à la mobilité des personnes, donc la migration. Je me suis intéressée particulièrement au système régional de migration. Et par le hasard des choses, je suis venue en contact avec des gens qui faisaient la navette, des Autochtones Mayas, qui faisaient la navette entre l'État du Yucatan, au sud-est du Mexique, et le Canada, particulièrement en Colombie-Britannique et en Alberta, et dans une moindre mesure au Québec. Alors, ça faisait longtemps que je me sentais un peu coupable de faire des sujets qui ne concernaient pas mon pays. Alors que là, j'avais l'occasion de suivre les gens du Mexique jusqu'au Canada. Donc, je faisais le lien entre deux entités, si on veut. Et c'est aussi l'autre point qui m'a décidé, l'autre élément qui m'a décidé à entreprendre une recherche là-dessus, c'est que, comme vous le savez sans doute, ça fait depuis 1974 que des Mexicains et des Mexicaines viennent travailler au Canada à faire pousser nos légumes et nos fruits. Au Yucatan, par contre, le programme a débuté seulement dans les années 2000, alors que je travaillais déjà là depuis un petit bout de temps. Et il me semblait intéressant d'examiner ce contingent de personnes, puisque dans leur propre pays, ils sont discriminés, ils sont racisés, ils sont parmi les plus pauvres. Alors, je voulais suivre cette cohorte-là de personnes. C'est 200, à l'époque où je faisais mon étude, c'était 240 personnes sur 20 000, mais tout de même, ça me donnait l'occasion de faire une étude assez exhaustive sur pourquoi ils migrent, mais surtout comment ils se sentent et quelles sont les répercussions sur la vie familiale et sur la vie communautaire. Alors voilà l'étincelle, c'est plusieurs étincelles, ce n'est pas une étincelle en particulier. Et aussi, c'est le désir de pouvoir aussi en même temps continuer à former des étudiants, des étudiantes qui ont été mes auxiliaires pour cette recherche-là.
Dans ton livre, tu identifies bien le nombre de personnes qui ont transité, surtout des hommes, et tu donnes les raisons. Mais dans le projet, tu t'intéresses en particulier à l'expérience des femmes, le nombre restreint, mais aussi les femmes de ceux qui voyagent. Peux-tu nous donner un peu le contexte de ce regard-là que tu as eu dans ton projet sur l'expérience particulière des femmes dans ce processus de migration?
Bien, en fait, je m'intéresse dans d'autres recherches aussi, je m'intéresse au rapport entre les hommes et les femmes et surtout au changement social, au changement dans les rapports de genre. Donc, ça me donnait l'occasion de voir quel était l'impact sur les rapports sociaux de genre de la migration des hommes. Bon, les femmes, il n'y en avait que 4 dans notre cohorte, on les a suivis, mais en fait, leur raisonnement ressemble beaucoup à celui des hommes. Alors, ce que je pensais, c'est que je pensais que la migration aurait un impact sur le changement et j'ai réalisé à la fin du compte que de mon point de vue, ça n'améliorerait pas l'égalité entre les hommes et les femmes, mais ça renforçait le pouvoir masculin sur les femmes à distance parce que l'homme qui migre garde le contrôle sur sa femme et maintenant par ce merveilleux outil qui est le Skype et le téléphone. Alors, vous voyez, moi, je m'attendais à beaucoup de changements, une prise d'autonomie, une prise d'autonomie par les femmes et c'est plutôt le contraire. En fait, je ne veux pas être trop pessimiste, il y a quand même des changements. Et ce n'est pas des changements radicaux. Il faudrait faire une étude longitudinale là, pour le savoir, pour voir vraiment s'il y a du changement.
Merci. I'll ask one last question to you in English, and you respond in the language you choose. At times, we believe we are generous when we welcome people. It's the ethics of hospitality, when we welcome refugees and so on. It's a welcoming towards integration and so on. But there's another way to have an appropriation of people. We welcome them in an instrumental fashion. And that's a critical side to your project. Could you go a little bit further with regards to this? What we do to them while we get them here?
Well, in French. En fait, oui, effectivement, les gens qui intègrent ce programme-là, parce que c'est un programme très encadré, ils sont très satisfaits du traitement qu'on leur réserve ici parce qu'ils gagnent en 1 heure, ils gagnent ce qu'ils gagneraient en 1 jour chez eux. C'est certain. Cependant, il y a des choses qu'on ne considère pas dans le programme. Dans le programme, on les considère comme une force de travail, point. Mais ce sont des êtres humains avec une famille, avec des sentiments, des émotions, des affects. Alors, je pense que notre générosité a des limites et je crois que, je ne peux pas rentrer dans les détails, mais je pense qu'on profite davantage de cette force de travail-là qu'eux profitent du Canada. Et je pense qu'il y a des statistiques qui peuvent le montrer, il y a des arguments monétaires qui peuvent le montrer. Juste un exemple, ils cotisent à la pension, c'est la pension de vieillesse qu'on dit, ils cotisent à toutes sortes de choses et très souvent, ils ne sont même pas en mesure de les récupérer. Alors ça, c'est un exemple parmi d'autres. Donc, c'est certain que je pense qu'il faut avoir une pensée pour eux alors quand on mange nos légumes, notre salade, parce que c'est eux qui les récoltent.
Merci, Marie-France. The last book we will examine is the book by Sean Mills, A Place in the Sun. I must say, a fantastic title. What was the spark?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, for me, when I really look back to the moment where I began thinking about this book, it was as I was putting the final touches on my previous book called The Empire Within, which was also published by McGill Queens, and it was about the late 2009, the beginning of 2010. That book came out in March 2010. And as I was working on that book, which was about trying to kind of reconceptualize and rethink the geographical location in which we understand Quebec political history in the 1960s, I really began to see that there was sort of a kind of major intellectual and political contribution of Haitian migrants to the transformation of Quebec, something which was, of course, well known within the Haitian community, but outside of the Haitian community, it was a bit more obscure. And I began just sort of thinking about this and learning and reading as much as I could. And in January 2010, I was beginning to make plans to travel to Haiti. And this was the moment of the earthquake in Haiti, which had, of course, a devastating impact on the country. And what I really witnessed, and I was living in Montreal at the time, what I really witnessed was the kind of incredible connections that we began to see between Quebec and Haiti in the aftermath of the earthquake. And it was at that moment that I began thinking about digging a lot deeper and working on this project. And also, I have to say, in the aftermath of of the earthquake, we began to see a whole real a kind of large number of books that began to be published about Haiti that were really very, very critical of Western influence in Haiti. And there's sort of book after book, and I am in general agreement with the thesis of most of those books. But what I realized is that almost none or very, very few kind of put the question in reverse. Rather than how did the Western world influence Haiti, I wanted to really think about how Haiti had shaped society of the West. I wanted to rethink my own field, which was Quebec political and intellectual history, and that was really where the book emerged from. One last thing I wanted to say, you were talking about the importance of the Federation and of SSHRC for, and the language question. I just want to kind of add a plug as well for translation, funds for translation, which is very important in this. So this book came out in October, it came out in February, last February in English. It just came out in October in French using a translation grant published by the Haitian Brest, Mémoire d'Encrier. And so it's well distributed in Haiti and in the Haitian community in Montreal. So that, for me anyway, I think the money for translating between the linguistic communities in Canada is also extremely important.
You will find an ally as the president of the Federation. As you just mentioned, the intellectual history of French Canada and Quebec is, there are many moments in the bilateral relationship between French Canada and the Haitian community. You mentioned the Congress of the late 1930s, the early 60s, and then the 70s, and then the contemporary periods. Can you pick one of these moments, the one you prefer, and sort of construct that in a couple of minutes for this podcast?
Very interesting question. I'm not sure if I necessarily have a preference, because each is sort of telling of a very different particular political moment. So the Congress on the French language in Quebec City in 1937 was really a coming together of a particular part of the Haitian elite with a particular part of the French Canadian elite, which really instilled this idea that French Canada and Haiti are both part of a broader kind of Francophone world of the Americas, or the French Americas, tied together by Catholicism and by language. Now, of course, that was always an idea, something that didn't necessarily correspond to the lived reality in Haiti, in which the majority of the population, of course, speak Haitian Creole, not French, and are not Catholic. And so that construction of that idea, nevertheless, had lasting consequences. Perhaps then we could flip forward to the mid-1960s and the interaction between dissident Haitian intellectuals now exiled in Montreal with their own kind of counterparts in Quebec, writers and poets associated with magazines such as Parti Pris, and they would have Monday night poetry readings in which poets of these two kind of different dissident traditions would interact with each other, again kind of pointing to the kind of connections between those two histories. But then, I'd be kind of remiss not to talk about real moments of conflict and tension around deportation struggles of non-status Haitian migrants throughout the 1970s, for example. And as well, I think for me, perhaps my favorite part of the book is trying to really rethink how we understand intellectual and political history in Quebec, and try to think about how we could expand how we understand political and intellectual actors in the province. And one chapter, I believe it's chapter 6, really tries to explore the intellectual worlds, the intellectual and political worlds of both Haitian feminists and Haitian taxi drivers. Taxi drivers who were involved in a major political struggle against discrimination in the taxi industry in the late 1970s and early 1980s.
Thank you. I'm tempted to ask one last one before we move to the conversation between the three of you. Danny Laferrière.
Yeah.
I mean, Danny Laferrière has possibly one of the best worldwide known Quebec authors and so on, and sort of incorporating within the figure of one person the whole of the thematics and the complex hybrid identity that's being reconstructed as we currently stand right now in Quebec. So Danny Laferrière as a symbol. Start with him and try to make sense of the contemporary challenges of the relationship between that community and contemporary.
Sure. Well, I think, to really understand Danny Laferrière, we need to understand the complexity of his own pathway, his own journey, of course, arriving to Montreal in 1976 with precarious immigration status, very few resources at his disposal. And he, what I really tried to explore in the book, rather than looking at the entire career of Danny Laferrière, is to really explore that particular political moment in which he arrived, the late 1970s and early 1980s, and especially the reception of his first book, which of course was published in 1985. And so I think what I really tried to demonstrate is that to really understand the power of that initial book, one needs to understand its insertion and its the way in which it is kind of integrally bound up with Quebec intellectual, political, and literary history of that particular political moment. And so Danny Laferrière, who I think is a really great author, I guess one of the challenges would be to ensure that a figure like him, who I have great respect for and I devote a good part of a chapter in, doesn't become the sole voice, and that we remember the incredible diversity of different people involved. If we're speaking just the Haitian community, the incredible political and intellectual work of Haitian feminists throughout the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s, as well as other people who did not rise to fame but still had a lasting and important intellectual political mark on society.
I'm tempted to move you, and I'll start with you, Arthur, with the challenge that we in the social sciences and humanities in any one place, let's call it Toronto, Canada, challenge of both universality and particularity. We are in a scholarly community that has challenges, but we're also human beings in the turbulent world as it is in 2017. Being a social scientist in that tension between universality and particularity, in your case, is it a problem for you, and how do you live that kind of tension?
It's, for me, I guess my particularity, of course, was starting what I was doing just from a Canadian perspective. And then when I got into the comparative dimension was realizing, although there were the common threads, just how different these things unfolded. The one that strikes me particularly was in South Africa. There was a sociologist, Cheryl Walker, who is very much a social scientist, but also an activist from the beginning. And I thought, from my own particular point of view, being, for lack of a better word, being attacked in the courtroom was a harrowing experience. But when I went and was listening to and reading Cheryl's work, who's made a great contribution to sociology in South Africa, but she began her work under the apartheid regime, where the police were literally following her around, sometimes beating up on her informants. Some of her colleagues were arrested. Many of them had to flee the country. And so from that very particular point of view, I realized that from my perspective, although what I went through, especially my first trial, was terrifying, to be frank. I wasn't used to having people ask you questions with hostile intent, but they weren't life-threatening. But but in all these countries, the social sciences, in Australia, we tend to think of it, at least the popular image, as a fairly liberal place, but I realized that the Aborigines of Australia were subject to severe racism, and people who, if you travel in the anthropology community, you feel it's a pretty liberal country. You step across the street into a local pub, and oh my God, it's a different world when it comes to Aborigines. So for me, traveling, for me, each country was a somewhat different angle on what I was experiencing in Canada. And so in that sense, I guess, I originally, of course, immigrated from the US, so probably more Canadian now than...
Je vais t'interrompre pour demander le point de vue de Marie-France sur les défis de l'universel et du particulier en voyageant combien de fois entre le Mexique et le Canada?
Je ne les compte même plus, peut-être 50 fois, je ne sais pas. Si j'ai bien compris la question, en fait, moi, je la prendrais peut-être autrement. En tout cas, dans mon cas, c'est pas tant l'universel et le particulier, c'est ce qui m'intéresse et puis ce à quoi j'ai incité mes étudiants et étudiantes à s'intéresser, c'est peut-être de toujours faire le lien entre la globalité, comme par exemple des phénomènes d'internationalisation du capital, etc., dont avec les maquiladoras, par exemple, c'était l'idéal. S'intéresser aussi, par contre, en descendant un peu en entonnoir, c'est-à-dire quand on arrive plus dans les différents pays, s'intéresser à la forme particulière que prend l'État dans ce pays-là et les institutions, sans oublier de descendre encore, c'est-à-dire d'aller toujours vers la localité, le local. Donc, mes études, je pense, oscillent entre la caractérisation de la globalité. Donc, par exemple, dans le cas des migrants autochtones Maya Yucatec, c'est un phénomène universel que le travail temporaire, le travail migratoire, particulièrement dans l'agriculture, l'horticulture. Donc, je pense qu'on trouve dans chaque parcelle de particularité ou de localité, on trouve beaucoup à dire sur le monde qui nous entoure, le vaste monde finalement.
Merci Marie-France. Et le mot de la fin, ce sera Sean. Sean.
Thank you. I think for me, the way I kind of really thought through that question, certainly as I was writing this book, is to have come to an understanding that knowledge itself has a location, it kind of has a geography, that there's a geopolitics to knowledge, to borrow a phrase from Walter Mignolo. And so, I think the quotation I begin the book with is a citation from one of the Haitian taxi drivers who had developed this publication during these political campaigns in the early 1980s at Montreal. And we're drawing links between a particular taxi stand, say, in Saint-Michel, with broader Quebec politics, with the southern United States, with the fight against apartheid in South Africa. And we're actually drawing from a very particular location by imagining themselves in a kind of broader world. So I guess one thing one response to the question would be, perhaps we need to rethink how we understand universal and who it is who counts as universal. But in a very personal sense, I began this book as an attempt to show how Quebec society was transformed by Haiti and by Haitian migrants, and I realized that as I was working on the project, I myself was being transformed, and I was coming to a far deeper understanding of the relationship between think tragedy and beauty, the instability of history, as well as the politics of knowledge.
Merci, Sean. Et je voudrais vous demander d'applaudir nos trois...